which was a redo of the aborted broadcast due to power challenges, which affected our internet supply. And then, things happened. But it is what it is. We're happy to be back. We're going to be looking briefly, in just a couple of minutes, what that has meant, the result between Manchester City and Everton there. That game just ended in a 2-1 victory for Manchester City. And Matheus Nunes, what a way to get your first goal of the season on match day 34 of all days. Interesting. So, but we will be here for as long as one, internet can permit us, two, for as long as you guys are on the broadcast. So clearly, it is up to you to decide for how long we will be here. But like I said, I know many of you would want to go to sleep, so we won't make this too long. We'll try to, keep it simple and short as we review that particular result that we just witnessed from the Etihad Stadium, where Man City have beaten up against Aston Villa, their rivals in the pursuit there for the top five finish as far as the UEFA Champions League qualification for this particular campaign is concerned, because pretty much, yes, we are done. I was just testing our audio there, but I think we are good to go. You guys can hear me loud and clear. Where do we even started from? A quick start from Manchester City, pretty much very lively game. It was off to a great start. Marcus Rashford hitting the best of the upright, pretty in similar fashion that Mohamed Salah had did against Leicester, as Liverpool beat up against Leicester by 0-0 over the weekend. So in as early as 18 seconds into the game, Marcus Rashford had already hit the upright. But since that did not count, it was Man City, the home side, that drew first blood through Bernardo Silva with a brilliant strike there. A loose ball in the box that, he strongly hits to beat Love from Germany. Yes, and nice. Thank you so much for tuning to the broadcast. Much appreciated. Namaste. That is from AI of Multiverse from India. Namaste. Is it like this? Namaste. Thank you so much for tuning to the broadcast. If you're new here, kindly like the broadcast, kindly subscribe to the channel. It will do me huge honors when you like, when you comment, when you subscribe. Yes, so I'll be really grateful if you do subscribe to the channel. Yes, Multiverse. What do you do, Multiverse? Let me know. Nice or nice, depending. If it's in French, it's nice. If it's in English, it's nice. Nice from Germany. What do you do? What? how is it going on your side? But like I was saying, we're discussing Manchester City versus Aston Villa. That game that's just concluded at the Etihad Stadium by 2-1. Robert Kesakos is my name, and we are on the Football Tribe YouTube channel. Done already subscribed. Thank you so much, Mark. Much appreciated for that subscription. Really appreciate that effort. So Marcus Rashford hit the best of the upright, and that was in as early as 18 seconds. But it was Man City that drew first blood through Bernardo Silva on the other side with that brilliant strike. Emiliano Martinez trying to, save that ball by pairing it to the side, but the shot proved too strong for him, so it ended up in the back of the net, and it was 1-0. In the 18th minute, we had a key moment in the game. Of course, it was a penalty that resulted from an accidental. It does qualify for an accidental contact between, I think, Morgan Rogers and Ruben Diaz. I stand to be corrected on who the Aston Villa player actually was, but I don't think it was Morgan Rogers. Aston Villa were on the counter-attack. Ruben Diaz in trying to defend. It was Marcus Rashford that made the biggest chunk of the run, and then whether he was passing that ball to Morgan Rogers or not, or he was playing the pass for himself, that is also subject to debate, but he did it was Morgan Rogers that ran with the ball into the box. So as Ruben Diaz attempts to defend, he can't reach the ball. He realizes that, and he tries to withdraw from committing any form of contact. And then, of course, the player goes down. The referee didn't want anything to do with it. He waved it away. He didn't want to give a penalty, and play went on. Ruben Diaz must have felt pretty much good about himself that he had not done anything intentional to try and stop the player from scoring. But upon review from the VAR, they came back, they called the referee to the monitor to review the incident, and it ended up his decision that he had earlier waved away ended up being overturned. In overturning that, you did have a penalty was awarded, and when a penalty was awarded, Marcus Rashford, who by the way scored another penalty, I think against Ederson Morales back in 2019 at the same grounds, was the one that stepped forward to score that resultant penalty, sending Stefan Ortega in the opposite direction and placing it in the other corner. So Manchester City dominated the affairs of the first half. They dominated every aspect of the game, possession, winning duels, and that kind of thing. And they were always trying to be on the front foot. Aston Villa chose to not really sit back, but it did appear that their game plan was planned around, being out of possession and looking to catch Manchester City on the counter-attack. The script did not change much in the second half, although I did personally feel that the intensity of the game had sort of dropped down a bit. These are teams that did play over the weekend. Mancity, Aston Villa having a crucial game in which they beat up against Newcastle by 4-1. Very, very big game. That was on Saturday. They won that one. Manchester City having to leave it late against Everton. They beat them by 2-0. Nico O'Reilly and as well as Mateo Kovacic, the players on target there in that 2-0 victory against Everton at Goodison Park. So today, the second half, I did feel a bit slow-paced overall. Yes, Man City continued to dominate possession in terms of when you look at the statistics and all, because overall they had a possession of 62% as opposed to 38% of Aston Villa. This is according to live score statistics. So if you find the figures slightly different elsewhere, please do not be quick to judge. If you're new to the broadcast, kindly hit that like button and maybe leave me a comment, subscribe if you're new to the channel. You'll be much appreciated. Overall, Man City, like I said, dominated the affairs. They had 6 shots on target, as opposed to Aston Villa's 3 on target. Off target, there were 6 as opposed to Aston Villa's 3, and that kind of thing. So clearly, those statistics, Manchester City had as many as 10 corner kicks. Aston Villa had only 2. Really, that composition of stats really sends you the kind of picture that I've been trying to paint for you, that Manchester City dominated the game in almost every aspect. They were always on the front foot trying to get that goal because they very well knew what this particular fixture meant. Because, like I said, prior to kickoff of match day 34, it was 5 games left for almost all teams, actually for all teams now, and this means once they play this game, it's a gameless. They're left with 4 games. Both teams are vying to finish within the top 5 so that they can qualify for next season's UEFA Champions League. We all know that both teams have since been knocked out of that competition. Aston Villa falling to PSG, losing out 5-4 on aggregate score, while Man City were knocked out by Real Madrid at the playoff stage. So, and that kind of thing. So both sides are fighting a place in next season's UEFA Champions League. But in 5 minutes added time, but in the 94th minute, it was Matheus Nunes who scored his first Premier League goal in I think almost 2 years, and the first of this season on match day 34. But Jeremy Doku providing the assist with the outside of his foot, carrying that ball beyond the reach of Ezri Konsa and Pau Torres in defense, but also not so close to the reach of Emiliano Martinez, and it cuts up through the entire 16-yard box and then finds Matheus Nunes on the upper side, and he taps that ball back into the bottom corner, and it was 2-1 to win it for Pep Guardiola's side, who had his own disappointments with a couple of misses there, including one from what's his name? I forget his name. Sorry. What's his name? That young boy. Yes, I'm trying to find his name here. Yes, James Mancity. There's that ball he tried to look over the goalkeeper in Emi Martinez, and he missed. And you could see, Pep Guardiola on the touchline there. Of course, Pep Guardiola also got a yellow card for his protest when the penalty was awarded. Because when the penalty was awarded, the incident was shown on the large screens in the stadium, and clearly there was massive boos to the referee in protest of the decision that he had just taken, because many thought it was a decision unfair against Ruben Diaz, who really attempted to withdraw any form of contact. Unfortunately, it was so in proximity with Morgan Rogers that he ended up making contact with him that resulted into a penalty. But beautiful stuff there as Manchester City won that one. When that goal went in, you could see the disappointment of Unai Emery. I'm not so sure it was about his players, but just the mere fact that they had considered that late in the game was a disappointment in itself. You could feel that it tore him down. Really, he probably had already figured what he was going to say about the game overall, hoping that they do secure a point. Predictions for the Champions League winner. Allow me to give you that in a bit. Nice, but thank you for being on the broadcast. So you could see Unai Emery's disappointment on his face because they had lost this very tight, especially considering that goal really late. But the victory does send Manchester City to third place on the Premier League table with 61 points, just a point ahead of Nottingham Forest, who yesterday beat up against Tottenham Hotspur by 2-1. Those goals scored by Chris Wood and what's the other player that did score the first goal for Nottingham Forest to give them the lead, because Chris Wood had one of his goals cancelled for offside, but then he scored a header of Anthony Elanga's ball that he did float into the area. But I think what's his name? His name eludes me, but if somebody does remember it, do put it in the comment section. But the only consolation for Tottenham was scored by Richarlison. So that result from yesterday had taken Nottingham Forest back in third place, but they've now dropped into fourth place following that Manchester City victory from match day 34. So they do occupy fourth place. That's Nottingham Forest. Newcastle are fifth with a point behind Nottingham Forest, while Chelsea and Aston Villa remain at 57 points. Looks like. But anyway, the rest is still open. 4 games left for Manchester City and Aston Villa. The game in itself felt like a rehearsal of what could be the finals of the FA Cup, because remember, over the weekend, Aston Villa are going to be up against Crystal Palace in the FA Cup semi-finals on Saturday at Wembley Stadium, while Manchester City will be up against Nottingham Forest. That is on Sunday at the same venue. So clearly, do look out for that particular, games as far as the FA Cup is concerned. So that means some of your teams won't be in action in the Premier League, but they'll be in action in the FA Cup. That's why, by the way, Arsenal do have their game tomorrow of match day 34. It's one of those games that were brought closer. They're up against Crystal Palace at the Emirates Stadium tomorrow. We'll get to discuss that name. Okoyo, I'm afraid before Mancity gets to its peak going to be a mid-table team for a couple of seasons to come. So what Okoyo you're saying is that you're of the view that Manchester City are going to drop, maybe are going to continue dropping in regards to not just their form, but in overall rankings of the Premier League. I do not want to disagree with you so much. Why? Because we all know that Pep Guardiola has embarked on rebuilding a new team. That's why he brought in the likes of Omar Mamouche, I think Victor Pereira, the one from Paramides, that young defender, the likes of Oscar Bob, the likes of these academy players, the likes of James Marketing, young players, O'Reilly, yes, Nick O'Reilly, one of those players. Then, of course, the signing of Jeremy Doku does come into contention. That was signed last season, and all the other signings. Of course, there's that midfielder. His name slips my mind. The one signed from FC Porto, the holding midfielder. But of course, then there's going to be an exodus of senior players from the club. Kevin De Bruyne has already announced that he will be leaving the club. We all know that Kyle Walker is already out on loan to AC Milan. We also know that Ilkay Gundogan, who was resigned from Barcelona, could also exit in the summer. The goalkeeper in Ederson Morales is one of those that could leave the club in the summer. Jack Grealish, John Stones, Mateo Kovacic, as well as Bernardo Silva. I do know for a fact that Benfica are interested in signing Bernardo Silva should he decide to leave Manchester City at the end of this season. So clearly, it looks like that there is going to be a mass exodus from Manchester City in the summer. And once you do that, it is not very easy for you to bring in a whole lot of new players and then have them gel, right there and then, and play the Manchester City way. We all know this season they've not played the Man City way. They lacked the intensity. They've lacked the finesse with which they played that tic-tac football. We all witnessed it all season. We all know what the injury to Lodri meant to them. He suffered that anterior cruciate ligament injury, or known as the ACL, in that 2-2 draw against Arsenal in the first leg at the Etihad Stadium. So I do agree with you to a certain extent that Man City, if teams like Newcastle, if teams like Aston Villa, if teams like Chelsea continue to raise that competition, that competitiveness, if let's say Manchester United are able to bounce back into competitive football, if let's say Tottenham rise to the occasion next season, then maybe if Man City have a whole set of new players in large context, then it could be an issue that really that they continue to slide down. But then it also means we also ought to bear in mind that next season Pep Guardiola will be in the final year of his contract. So that is also to bear in mind. So it will beg the question whether Pep Guardiola will be looking to extend his stay at the Etihad Stadium, or he will be choosing to opt out, and that Man City will look to find a new manager. So all that has to be put into context. But I certainly do not disagree with your arguments if you are that school of thought. But I also do subscribe to a school of thought that if there's any manager more qualified than most to start a Man City rebuild, then it is none other than Pep Guardiola, because he's really, really capable of making whatever rebuild that Man City do need to make. That pretty much we really do know as far as getting that team back to competitive football is concerned. Of course, their goal, like we did say, is to qualify for next season is UEFA Champions League, where they didn't really do well this season. I think they finished 22nd on that 36 team low. That's why they had to play the playoff with Real Madrid, who had finished 10th or 11th above Bayern Munich and that kind of thing. Anyways, Okuyo, you do say Aston Villa and Newcastle, if they get elite coaches, they will substitute the latter. That's what you continue to say. Again, I think Newcastle is already showing us that they are competing with the big boys. For starters, they did beat up against Liverpool in the finals of the Carabao Cup at Wembley Stadium by 2-1. We all remember that. Alexander Isak, one of those on target, as well as that towering defender in Ban. Is it Dan Ban? Is that his name? Maybe. So he scored that goal. So they're really showing that they are up to the task. Ed Howe is not a bad manager, if I'm being honest. He's not a bad manager, despite the fact that his career has, a a sacking on his resume. That's when he was sacked at AFC Bournemouth. We all remember. Then I think it took Scott Parker to earn Bournemouth promotion again, although Scott Parker himself was eventually sacked, and then they brought in Andoni Iraola, who is now in charge of AFC Bournemouth at the moment. So I do think, yes, it does beg the question whether Ed Howe is the manager that gets Newcastle from the current level that they are at to the next level. I do think he's capable. He just needs a bit of time. He needs perhaps more better players. He does have a good set of players, the likes of players that would play in elite teams. Players like Alexander Isak, very, very good. Of course, they've had injury issues with the likes of Steven Botman. And then the players like Fabian Schär, I do think he's a very good defender. They do have players like Anthony Gordon, who we previously has been linked with a potential move to Liverpool, and to some extent, rumors linked him to Arsenal for a bit. So I certainly think that Ed Howe can really build a very competitive Newcastle side. We all know that they've tormented the big boys. Arsenal is a culprit for one of those that they've tormented. But again, like I said, it does still beg the question whether he is the manager that will get them from this level to the next. But maybe a change, players like Bruno Guimaraes have been linked again with potential moves to Manchester City. Joelinton, very good player. He's a starter with the Brazil international team. Very good players. Of course, the likes of Jacob Murphy, although good, I do think that they do qualify for big squad players. Overall, when you look at the context of very competitive teams that are vying to win the Premier League and that kind of thing. So when it comes to Aston Villa, I think, Aston Villa, I think have one of the best and balanced squads so far in the Premier League. When you look at their attacking strength, when you look at their midfield, you look at their defensive lines, the players that they're able to bring on. We saw the kind of team that swept Newcastle off their feet, that had Oli Watkins in there, Amadou Onana, Boubakary Kamara, and that kind of those kinds of players. Morgan Rogers, Gordon Ramsay, all those players. Leon Bailey is for now almost a forgotten figure, but John McGinn, Yuri Tillemans in that attacking midfield, he's been quite brilliant. Of course, today wasn't perfect for them, wasn't a good day in office, but I think Unai Emery is a very capable manager. He's done it at a senior or top level. He's done it at PSG, where he won the French League One with PSG. To his name, he has, I think, 4 UEFA Europa League titles, 3 of those coming in Sevilla, including beating Liverpool at the finals, I think in 2016, was it? At 2015-2016 season, beating Liverpool by 3-1. So three titles with Sevilla, and then another Europa League title with Villarreal, the Yellow Submarines there of Spain. So I do think Unai Emery is an elite manager. Now, if you do want to sort of understand where Unai Emery has gotten this team, remember where they were under the charges of Steven Gerrard. Remember, Gerrard gets sacked, midway into the season, and then Unai Emery is brought on. At that time, Aston Villa were staring potential relegation in the face, but it's no longer the conversation. Last season, they did qualify for the UEFA Champions League, and remember, the slots were, 4. There were just 4 slots, so they finished in the top 4 and qualified for the UEFA Champions League, where they did, for me, extremely well. For a team that was returning for the first time, I think, since the 1982-83 season, when they went on to the finals to beat Bayern Munich in Rotterdam by 4-0. So I do think Unai Emery really has it in him to take that team forward. Going in that league table, or the UEFA Champions League format, they finished 8th, went on to the round of 16 where they played Club Brugge, knocked those out. Of course, met PSG in the quarterfinals, and of course that didn't go to plan, but they were able to win that home game 3-2. They will only have themselves to blame in the manner in which they conceded the first 2 goals. that was at Villa Park. But in the larger context of things, I do think that maybe given more resources, that Unai Emery and Ed Howe at Aston Villa and Newcastle respectively can really do a wonderful job to try and push, maybe some of those big teams out. In any case, we've seen that when Tottenham have not adjusted their playing style, look where they are. They are down to what, 15 on the Premier League table. So Okuyo, Amlen, I do agree with some of your submissions or your school of thought or your line of argument to a certain extent, but in the overall context of things, I do think that Aston Villa and Newcastle are in good hands. Like I said, Newcastle is one of those teams that have been hampered with injuries. Do not forget that they did have Nick Pope out with the shoulder, I think shoulder injury out for quite some time. They did have the likes of Steven Botman, who you've not seen very often, and injuries of that kind. So they really did cost them. They have an elite striker in Alexander Isak, who has a tally of 21 goals so far this season. He's at level with Broad Erling Haaland or Mancity, and next to them there should be Chris Wood with, I think, 19 goals, and then the likes of Brandon Mbeumo do come in there. While above them, of course, is Mo Salah of Liverpool with, is it what, 28 Premier League goals or 27 there about? So it's quite impressive what we've seen this season. Although the season, I would want to hear from you, Mr. Okuyu, what you make of the overall exhibition of the season in itself as overall, because at this stage, with 5 games left to play, we already know that the 3 teams that have been relegated in Southampton, Leicester City, and Ipswich Town, we do know who the Premier League champion is going to be. That's Liverpool in waiting. Yet in the previous 2 seasons, things have been different. Maybe even 3 seasons, because we had Liverpool pushing Man City to the title, for the title to the wire. That's in 2022, 2023. No, sorry, in 2021, 2022. Then in 2022, 2023, Arsenal pushing Man City to finish with just a 5-point gap. And then last season in 2023, 2024, again, we had that title be pushed to the wire, Arsenal pushing Man City, and Man City having to edge them to win their 4th straight Premier League title, and that kind of thing. So I would be interested in hearing from you what you've made of the season overall, in regards to where teams may finish. One, because we all know that Manchester United have capitulated this season. They've lost so many games, as many, I think, as 15 so far in the Premier League this season. I do stand to be corrected on that particular fact, but if my memory serves me right, that's as many games as they've lost so far this season. And it's not a good tale for a team like Manchester United, because Manchester United is a very big team. Yes, they've lost 15 games. That's not typical of a team that has, 19 titles to their name as Man United. So really, it's not been a very good season. Tottenham Hotspurs, I mean, in 2019, Tottenham Hotspurs were playing in the finals of the UEFA Champions League and losing to Liverpool. I mean, that's the Tottenham present day that are 16 on the Premier League table. So things have really not gone good for Ange Postecoglou. Of course, the consolation for both teams is that they are both into the semi-finals of the UEFA Europa League, and we could see an all-English final if Tottenham are able to knock out Bordeaux Glimont, while Manchester United have a test against Atletico Bilbao, a team that doesn't concede so many goals. So they start as well. So clearly, it's not been a typical Premier League season as we've come to know of the Premier League. But I just wanted us to look briefly in regards to the kind of business that Man City were able to do in the January transfer window there. For those of you that do remember, Omar Mamouche was one of the players that did join Man City during the recently concluded January transfer window. Omar Mamush, Abdukodi, Kushanov, and then of course you had, yes, it is Nico Gonzalez, the midfielder, the holding midfielder from FC Porto, and then of course the young defender in Victor Reis or Reis from Pyramides that they signed, and that is in the context of Man City trying to rebuild that team. In fact, Pep Guardiola did say that they may not need any centre backs. I think players like Manuel Akanji will stay, Ruben Diaz will stay, so that if anything, they look to bluster, maybe they will bring in one centre back. But then Nice asked about our predictions for the UEFA Champions League winner. My prediction for the UEFA Champions League winner. This is a bit of a hard one because we're at the semi-final stage where Arsenal have PSG while Barcelona have Inter Milan. Now, Barcelona, I think, again, I stand to be corrected, but are the most high-scoring team in Europe or in the UEFA Champions League so far. Let's look at, first of all, who did they knock out this year? Arsenal knocked out Real Madrid, PSG knocked out Aston Villa. PSG have been to the semi-finals of the UEFA Champions League 4 times out of the last 6 seasons. In 2020, they were in the finals of the UEFA Champions League and lost to Bayern Munich by 1-0. So PSG and Arsenal have both never won the competition, so they are already bound to cancel out one another. That means that in the finals we will have one team, at least it is guaranteed that one of the teams that we will have in the finals has never won the UEFA Champions League, and that's Arsenal or PSG. Arsenal have only been to one final, as far as I can remember. That's 2006 when they met Barcelona in Paris, France, and they lost that game by 2-1. Jens Lehmann suffering the red card in that one. Of course, for what was believed to be a dangerous foul or a goal-denying opportunity or foul to Samuel Eto'o. We do remember that. Of course, Robert Pires was sacrificed for a defender for the goalkeeper, Manuel Almunia, to come on. So, there's that. But Arsenal versus PSG. Arsenal did beat PSG in the league format stage by 2-0 at the Emirates Stadium. It's a much different PSG, but if there's anything that I did observe in PSG's game against Aston Villa, is that PSG defensively, they may not be as solid as they did appear against Liverpool, because against Liverpool, they were quite impressive. Nuno Mendes, very, very impressive versus Mo Salah over 2 legs. Then Achraf Hakimi, a player that is managed I think 14 assists and 6 Premier League and 6 goals across different competitions. Very good. Then Pacho Willian in that defense, and whoever he may be partnered with, whether it is Presido Kimpembe, of course it won't be him, but regardless, that midfield of João Neves, Vitinha, and Fabian Ruiz, and then the front three of Ousmane Dembele, Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, Isaiah Doué, or it could be on another day Bakola. I mean, it's a very, very strong team. Arsenal's strength largely is being in defensively solid. I think they've so far conceded 6 or 7. They've conceded, I think, 7 goals so far in the campaign, because they did. Let's count them. They conceded 2 against PSV at the round of 16. That's in. Actually, they conceded 3 versus PSV at the round of 16. 1 in Netherlands and 2 at the Emirates Stadium. They conceded another versus Girona in Spain. That makes it 4. They conceded 1 against Sporting Lisbon. That was 5, and then 6 against Inter Milan when they lost by 0-0. Then, of course, they conceded 1 versus Real Madrid. Now, they've conceded 7 goals only. So, defensively solid. And that's one of the reasons that I do think that when we get to discuss that fixture much later on this channel, that I do think will give Arsenal the edge over PSG for them to advance to the finals of the UEFA Champions League. So my prediction on that semi-final is for Arsenal to advance. Then the other final is between Inter Milan versus Barcelona. Inter Milan were in the 2023 UEFA Champions League finals and lost to Mancity by a goal to nil. That was scored by Rodri for Mancity as they were crowned champions of Europe for the first time in the club's history, of course, under none other than Pep Guardiola, a manager that had already won the competition twice with Barcelona in 2009 and 2011, both occasions having to beat up against Manchester United on the two occasions. So Inter Milan under the charges of Simone Inzaghi, Barcelona under the charges of a manager in Hans Flick, who has won this competition before, by the way, with Bayern Munich back in 2020 when they won the treble. They were under the charges of Hans Flick. Remember, Hans Flick remained at the club as caretaker initially when Niko Kovac was sacked. So when Niko Kovac gets sacked, Hans Flick takes charge of the team and he guides it to a treble. Never mind that he was eventually let go of, and I think they brought in there's a manager that was brought in, and then eventually Julian Nagelsmann came to the club, and then he was eventually knocked out or sacked out, and then they brought in Thomas Tuchel and eventually Vincent Kompany. But that notwithstanding, Barcelona versus Inter Milan, very, very difficult to predict. Why? Inter Milan are very good defensively. They are quite solid, although they did concede 3 goals versus Bayern Munich, one at the Allianz Arena as they are winning that fixture by 2-1. Fratesi scoring the winner in that one, as well as Lautaro Martinez having scored the goal that had given them the lead before before Thomas Müller scored it in the 85th minute to cancel out that lead. And then they came to Italy, that's at the San Siro, and they conceded 2 goals, one scored by Harry Kane and the other by Eric Dyer, while Lautaro Martinez scored on the other side, as well as was the other player, Benjamin Pavard, a former Bayern Munich player, was the other that scored for Inter Milan. So the game finished 2-2, and Inter Milan advanced 4-3 on aggregate score. So again, that fixture in itself, the double header between Bayern and Inter Milan, showed us that yes, Inter Milan, as solid as they are defensively, because until up to that stage, I think they had only conceded about 3 goals or 4 in the UEFA Champions League all across the campaign. So yes, defensively solid, but Bayern Munich showed us that they are not impenetrable. So they will be facing off with the Barcelona that has scored the most goals in the UEFA Champions League. What does that then mean? I know your question was simple, that you wanted a prediction for the UEFA Champions League winner, but I wanted to build base or background or foundation for my eventual prediction in this. So because we need to know who goes through to the semifinals and eventually who will play the finals in Munich, and then who can be winner. So it's a bit of a tough one, especially between Barcelona and Inter Milan. Not to say the one of Aston is easier, but Barcelona very high scoring, but they do concede a lot of goals, and Inter Milan do not concede so many goals. They're defensively solid. Bastoni, very, very disciplined. Hakan Çalhanoğlu in that midfield, Henrik Mkhitaryan. You do have very, very decent players. Lautaro Martinez, of course, leading the lines in there as the striker, but they do play a back 3, a midfield of 5 that has those players, and then they play a front 2. That's Marcus Thuram and Lautaro Martinez, who usually play in the front 2 for the club there. While in that midfield, like I mentioned, Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Henrik Mkhitaryan are some of the players that do often play in that midfield. Of course, it goes without saying that changes can be made to the effect of that. But I just wanted to look up here the last starting lineup versus Bayern Munich. Of course, Jan Sommer in goal, very experienced goalkeeper. Benjamin Pavard in the back line, Alessandro Bastoni and Francesco Acerbi in that back. Then yes, the name I was looking for was Nico Barella in that midfield. Very, very brilliant. Now, Barcelona, of course, I do think I do think that Inter Milan have 55% chances to advance at the expense of Barcelona. Yes, I know Simone Inzaghi has never won it, may not have, but having reached the finals in 2023, really, you cannot say he does not have the experience. I do think he's a very, very fantastic manager. I remember following him when he was still at Lazio, where he moved from, and then was succeeded by a former Chelsea manager in what's his name? The guy that used to smoke. Sorry, yes. So, anyways, so I do think Inter Milan will advance to the finals and meet with Arsenal. So, I do think Barcelona get dished out at the semifinals. Again, guys, it's mere predictions. Do not, bet your arms on this one. And then in the finals, of course, Inter Milan have won it before, I think 3 times, but the very last being in 2010 under the charges of Jose Mourinho, Diego Milito scoring in that final versus Bayern Munich. That team that had the likes of Samuel Eto'o, of course, they had then lost Zlatan Ibrahimovic to Barcelona. He had switched sides. They did have players like Wesley Schneider. They did have Maicon, the goalkeeper, the Brazilian goalkeeper, Cesar. Was it Julio Cesar? Yes. So that was the last time they won. So, and then in the finals, I don't know. Guys, allow me put a disclaimer on this because it's more wishful than perhaps personal objectivity. But I think if it's a final of Arsenal versus Inter Milan, Arsenal edge it and win it. That's my prediction. So, UEFA Champions League winner will be Arsenal. That's my prediction. What is your prediction? Nice. If you're still on the broadcast, or if you are dropped for any purposes whatsoever, when you return, do let me know what your thoughts are, what your prediction is. But again, we'll find time. I'm trying to get into the right pieces in place so that we can review those semi-finals. I thought I should get a second voice on the channel to review, but so far my contacts are yet to get back to me in regards to discussing those fixtures. But we'll be putting something out in respect to those semi-finals between Arsenal, PSG, as well as Barcelona versus Inter Milan, and eventually who makes it to the final and what our predictions overall will be. But I'm really hoping, I'm still positive because yes, I understand those fixtures are next week, but I'm really hoping that somebody does give me a response before the end of the week so that we can chat those things out. If it doesn't go out as planned, I'll look to do, the analysis by myself and give you my predictions still and give you my reasons why I think one team may have an advantage over the other. Where are the weaknesses? We all know that Arsenal will be without Thomas Partey in the first leg of the semi-finals. We've spoken today in today's earlier broadcast about Thomas Partey's contract situation at the club and that kind of thing. So, anyways, it's already 1 a.m. here in Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. Allow me to wrap it here, guys, and let you guys rest. For those of you that are on duty, that's indifferent, and depending on what your timeline is, whatever it is that you are, to continue with whatever it is that you are doing. But before I sign out, I would want to send my shout outs to Nis77 High. That's the name that does feature here. Then AI of Multi Universe. Thank you so much. That one was from India. Okuyo Amlen, thank you so much for your comments, for your submissions. That you gave us quite a debate to discuss on, and of course, Nice also posed his question, and then it gave us a bit of debate that was not part of the script, but it was much really appreciated. So keep the comments coming, keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next time. Stay blessed. I sign out. Peace.